Thank you so much for making time to join us today. We'll be talking about investment habits, and we'll be building on what we talked about last week, which is how to set investment goals. And we'll be making a lot of references to that particular conversation. So please, if you didn't watch that, please make sure that you go back to watch that. And also remember to like, share, subscribe, so that every time we're releasing such valuable content that you don't miss out on that. So to just start us off, I know African moms can be very interesting. And I remember growing up, my mom used to say that wewe hiyo simu umezoea kukaa nayo na hizo earphones. And then one day you come and you're like, nini mbaya naumwa na tumbo na ni hizo earphones. And you are like, what have the earphones to do with me having a stomachache? And it's interesting how we can easily form habits, and you see that even in little children, in grown-ups, and forming habits can be quite interesting. And as we talk about investment habits, we can't talk about them without understanding what are habits, how are they formed, what is the science behind them, and also look in particular some of the habits that we must drop off in 2024. And I remember we did a poll on some of the habits that most of us have to drop. And I think number one on the list was giving. A lot of us are very good at giving money, just for no reason. Someone wants something, you just give them money. And I think number two ni kukula pesa. Kukula pesa, I think, is a big is a big problem with many Kenyans. That wewe hauwezi lala vizuri na money when you know you have money in your account. And so today we'll talk about that, and we'll look at some of the principles that are going to help you to deal especially with some of the habits that you must drop. And to start us off, let's talk about habits. What is a habit? And I'm going to refer a lot to a book by James Clear. The book is called Atomic Habits. And I think he has taken time to really look into how human beings form habits, and also how you can be able to improve on a daily basis. It's a very good book. I'd recommend you to go and check it out. And if you're able to read the book, it's going to help you, especially this year, to know how you're going to change some of the habits. Especially for those who are always starting the year with, hii mwaka lazima niende gym. My goal this year is to lose weight. My goal this year, it is to invest. You must, that is a must read book. Anyway, let's dive right into it, and let's start by understanding what are habits. So he defines a habit is a routine or behavior that is regularly repeated and tends to occur subconsciously. So it is that thing that you don't need to be told. For instance, the way you drive to work, because it's habitual. Nobody tells you, by the way, here you're making a right turn, because the first time you were driving, you were very careful not to miss the turn. But then as time goes by, it becomes habitual. You even don't need to engage your mind while you're driving to work or even driving back home. And habits are often acquired through frequent repetition, and they become ingrained in one's life. And if you look at your life, you either have positive habits or negative habits. And I remember growing up, one of my uncles, if he sees this video, he's going to shoot me. He used to, I don't know what was wrong with his throat, something. Like every moment he was like, when I was growing up, it was not as frequent. And then he got to a place where he'll just be like, in a moment, he starts to clear his throat. And over time, it became like, it is part of him. He doesn't think about it. Like, you just find him doing and it's normal. For some of us, it's our interaction with people. They are words, they are faces that you make. You even don't know whether you're doing that. You do these things involuntarily. And you'll find that it goes deep into even financial habits that you begin to form. Like, you just do things, you even didn't think about it, but you just find yourself doing that. And these behaviors, like I mentioned earlier, they can either be positive or negative, and they contribute towards the overall actions that you take and the direction for your life. In the book 7 Habits, the author is talking about how actions lead to habits, and these habits that you form, they form your character as a person. And character now this is who you are. The author says, sow a thought, reap an action. Sow an action, reap a habit. Sow a habit, you will reap character. So, and it is progressive. Sometimes there are things that we start without even thinking about it. Like, I remember there's a time that it just started as a habit. Every time when you're leaving home, there's a place unapitia, either Mtura, and especially the Giza. So, and as we be looking at habit formation, we'll find that there are cues and triggers and how habits are formed. And you find that involuntarily, you'll find that when you're passing there, something just makes you want to go there. You didn't want Mutura, or even you are not thinking about it. But immediately you get there, when the aura slaps you, you're like, hey, I need this. And habits have a really powerful impact in our lives, because they will shape us, they'll shape our actions and influence the outcomes that we have. So whether the habits are going to be positive or negative, they are going to contribute a lot to personal growth, productivity, and well-being. And these are very critical things, because as we were talking about how to set goals, we talked about starting with the end in mind. So it's okay, you have set in place, these are the goals that I want to achieve this year. You have broken them down into either weekly goals, monthly, quarterly, and now the yearly goals. And you want to know, how am I going to get there? But every day, if your actions are not going to reflect where you are headed, if you don't start with the end in mind, then it means that any road can take you there. That popular adage that says, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, it simply means that if you don't align the actions that you're taking, a journey of 1,000 steps starts with a step. So if you take a step in the wrong direction, it means that you're just going to be moving, and you don't know where you're going. You're going to miss the point. And I think direction is more important than motion. So starting with that in mind, starting with the end in mind, really sets you in motion in the right direction. And so now the actions that you're going to take on a daily basis, the habits that you will need to form on a daily basis, are going to influence the outcomes that you wish to achieve, especially this year. The process of forming, breaking, or changing habits is central for us this year, because we want to achieve especially our investment goals. And now this leads me to asking, how are habits formed? It's a very integral question in this conversation. And habit formation involves a neurological and psychological process that occurs over time. So your brain is very much involved in the formation of habits. Now, there's a basic model that James Clear introduces in his book about how habits are formed, and they normally involve the following key components. Number one is cue or trigger. So what is this thing that cues you? Take a minute and pause and think. I would maybe, let's talk about a bad habit that you have, like impulse buying. Maybe your cue is normally spending time on Instagram or on the social media platforms, like scrolling, and you're like, oh, I like this one. How much will it cost? Are they available? Because now it's normally you just scroll and you find something that is captivating to you, and you decide, Let me ask, how much is it? Is it available? Now, there's always a cue. And this is actually the signal that initiates that habit loop, because like we cue songs, like for the song to start playing, that is what is going to influence some of, or has influenced some of the habits that you have. So it's very important to identify what is that cue. And it can be a specific time of the day. Maybe when you're from the office, it's lunch break, is when you're like, okay, let me check my social media platforms. It can be a particular location. Maybe like my good example of going home. Nafika place ya Mutura, and hapo ndo unakumbuka, by the way, I need Mutura. And it could be an emotional state. Maybe when you are happy. And you'll find this with a lot of people on Friday. Like you feel, yes, I have made it through this week. I have had a long week. And so the cue is, I need to feel a certain way. That's an emotional state. And you end up going out. So that could be an emotional state that could trigger you. Maybe sometimes you're happy and you feel like, if I'm happy, I need to treat myself in this way. If I'm sad, I need to get myself something. It is something that really triggers the direction of the actions that you're going to take. So that is number one, the cue. In habit formation, number two, there is the routine or behavior. So it starts with the cue, and this is the model of habit formation. So it starts with the cue, and then it goes to the routine or behavior. So now the routine is the actual behavior or the action that follows suit. So for instance, looking at it, maybe you are not happy, you didn't have a good day at work, or it has been a rough week, and you're like, now what do I need to do? Let me just go out. That action that we're talking about is now what we call the routine. It's what happens after the cue. And this is the habitual process, and it is what most people commonly associate with a behavior. It can be physical, it can be a mental process, or a specific set of behaviors. And this could be quite interesting, that you wake up in the morning. After waking up, maybe you're struggling to wake up in bed. That could be the place where you are at. And the next action that you need to do is take your phone and scroll through your social media. And that becomes the routine. So that becomes a habit like you're forming. So the cue was waking up. Where are you? In bed. What is the state? You're struggling to wake up. And you find yourself that you're going to spend time. So now that feeling of, I spend a lot of time on social media, it points out to show you, this is my cue. So in terms of changing the habits, which we'll be focusing on later on, we'll look at how now do we begin changing these habits. And number three is the reward. So we say there is the cue or the trigger. Number two, which follows, is the action, the routine of the behavior that follows after the cue. And then the reward is the positive outcome or benefit that follows the completion of the routine. And this normally is, for instance, you are feeling bad after you go out. How do you feel about it later on? Sometimes you may feel good, sometimes you may feel bad. And it reinforces the habit loop by providing a sense of satisfaction or pleasure. And the brain normally associates the cue and routine with positive mental reward, making it more likely that the habit will be repeated more in the future. So I remember, I think it was in the high school syllabus when we were being taught about cue and reward, where there was a dog, and known of a dog who every time when he was bringing the dog food, he would ring a bell. And the dog would expect food. So it got to a point where every time he rang the bell, the dog literally began to salivate. So because of the reward it was expecting. So most of the time, like, it is Friday and it's work time, maybe it's even lunch hour, but you are anticipating that feeling that you will have. It is the reward. And so it becomes like a loop. So it cues the next habit. So you'll find that every time when it's a weekend, you really want to, you know, to feel that feeling of exactly the reward. What happens? How do I feel after that happens? So, and as habits are repeated over time, now they become part of who you are. They're ingrained in you, and they become part of who you are, which we talk about as character. So now, with that being said and done, let's take a look into some of the financial habits that you think you should drop.